Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us on this Inside Housing Management webinar. Today's session is all about housing management. More than once in recent weeks, I've heard housing management staff described as the unsung heroes of the social housing sector. In today's session, we're going to be discussing why housing management matters, which is the name of a new Inside Housing Management campaign that I'll be introducing in just a moment. First, I'll introduce myself though. I'm Anna Highfield. I'm Best Practice Editor at Inside Housing and the editor of Inside Housing Management. Some of you will already be familiar with what Inside Housing Management is, but I know that others will be new to it. So for anyone who doesn't know, Inside Housing Management is a new part of Inside Housing, which is specifically designed for resident-facing staff. And we have loads of exclusive content, including news, features, comments, expert explainers, and we've got our own learning and development offering, which includes CPDs as well. So at the crack of dawn this morning, Inside Housing Management launched a new campaign called Housing Management Matters, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Joining us today to talk about why housing management matters are four brilliant guests. We'll be hearing from Jackie Allen, Chief Executive at Your Housing Group, Mavis Adambure, Tenancy Sustainment Coordinator and DSL at Eastlight Community Homes, Abby Peel, Communities and Placemaking Manager at Home Group, and Alison Dean, Chief Executive at Great Places Housing Group. We'll be hearing from each of our guests very shortly, but first I just want to talk briefly about the campaign I mentioned earlier. So we know that housing management has taken a battering in recent years, with staff turnover rates increasing, growing recruitment problems, and a kind of ongoing battle with negative news stories in the national press, as well as a generally negative rhetoric, which has trickled down from government level. So this is why we've launched our Housing Management Matters campaign. The campaign has three main aims. The first one is to recognise the vital work that housing management staff do, including through regular insights and articles on Inside Housing Management website. The second is to publicise the importance of these jobs to MPs and the wider public. And the third aim is to create resources which recruiters can use to help boost the number of people coming into those roles in the sector. So launching this campaign today, we've published the results of a major survey that Inside Housing Management ran in May, in which we asked nearly 250 front-facing housing staff to give us insights into their jobs, tell us why housing management is so important, and what are the biggest misconceptions about what they do. So I'm just going to give you a flavour of the insights we got from staff. The most popular reason that people said they'd chosen to work in housing management was to make a positive contribution to society. So 35% of respondents said they'd gone into housing to help people. 13% of respondents said they wanted to make a difference. And the second most popular reason was people saying they'd fallen into the social housing sector because they simply needed a job. So quite a high proportion, 18% of people said this as well. What was really interesting, though, is that a really high proportion of staff said the same thing that they enjoyed most about the job, regardless of how they got into the sector in the first place. So 77% of respondents said helping people is their favourite part of working in a front-facing role in housing management. Other things that staff said they really love about their roles is the variety and challenge of the work, the problem solving and creative abilities that they need to do their work, and allocations as well was a really popular reason. Another question we asked in the survey was, we asked staff to tell us what they think is the biggest misconception about jobs in housing management. Before I reveal what the most popular answers were to that question, we're really interested to get your views on this as an audience. So I'm going to ask everyone to do a poll to answer what you think is the biggest misconception about jobs, resident-facing jobs in housing management. So you should see, hopefully, a poll appearing on your screen now. The options that you'll see are all answers that we got in our survey, although you might have your own ideas about this as well. Just gonna let the results come through for a second. So 38.5% of people have said the biggest misconception is that staff don't care. That was the most popular reason. The second one is that tenants are viewed as problematic. And that was 29.6% of people. 13.5% of people say that they think the biggest misconception is the work is easy. And nearly 10% of people said that they think the biggest misconception is that housing is readily available for everyone who needs it. So that actually aligns very closely with the survey results that we gathered. So in terms of the biggest misconception about these roles, the most popular reason was that people think that people don't care about residents or that the job is easy. 16% of people said that they think that people don't care. And another 16% said that the biggest misconception is that people think it's easy. And then obviously smaller amounts of people said that there's this view of tenants being problematic, that it's all tea and biscuits and chatting. There's loads more to say about this survey because the results are really fascinating and people gave loads and loads of detail about their jobs, but you can go to the Inside Housing Management website to see the results in full. Now, though, we're going to hear from our speakers. So as people are speaking, you'll have a chance to submit audience questions, which we're then going to be discussing in a Q&A in the second half of the session. So please do make sure to say anything that's on your mind. State if you'd like your question to be answered by a particular speaker. And a popular question that we get asked is the session being recorded? It is being recorded, so it will be available on the IHM website afterwards. Great, so thanks again for joining. So I'm going to hand over now to Jackie Allen, Chief Executive of Your Housing Group, who is going to talk about how the role of a housing officer has changed since she started out in the sector.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you for putting this on today, because after 30 years in the sector, you can imagine that I truly do believe that housing management matters, having served my whole career in this amazing sector. I started out as a housing assistant, and had a very traditional path into my career: housing assistant, housing officer, into kind of the frontline manager, supervisor roles, then director positions, and then through to CEO. And I think that's the first thing that I would say about a career in social housing, actually, is that you can have a career. Now, I didn't choose to work in the housing sector. I kind of happened upon it. I knew that I wanted a career to do something that mattered. I knew that it'd have to be something I felt passionate about, something I would feel was really rewarding. I also knew that it'd have to be varied to keep for a whole career. A career can last 30, 40 years. So I know that I would need it to be really interesting, and variation does that. I knew it'd need to have some challenge with it, because challenge creates learning. And I think that's one of the things I'd say about a career in housing. You are always learning. Every day feels like a school day. There's something new. Nuances can be incredibly important, and there's always different nuances to learn. But above all, I wanted something that really mattered, that I would feel that was, a career well spent. That when I look back on my career, I think, yeah, I did something that mattered, that was worthwhile. That was a really good way to spend my work life. Because let's be honest, we spend an awful lot of time at work, as much time with our work families as we do our own families at home, serving customers who we'll get to know very well, which is a massive privilege. And I think that's one of the things that I would say I've learned massively. It is such a privilege to serve customers. You get to see them on their worst days, at their worst times in their lives, to the other end on their best days, at the best times in their life. And both are an absolute privilege to be able to have that kind of access to people. Certainly when I started out as a housing assistant, a housing officer, the job was always varied, it was always challenging, but it was nowhere near as complex as it is now. Poverty levels are at an all-time high, mental health and mental well-being. And we, and we see what that does to people, what it does to communities, people's needs are much higher and often are changing needs as well. So you might resolve one thing, but actually there's a whole host of other things that can happen. So it's much more challenging now. It will ask a lot more questions of you. But to be honest, that just makes it all the more interesting and all the more worthwhile to do that. I also think it's a wonderful sector to work in. We now see, when I came into the sector 30 years ago, it was mainly men of a certain age, particularly who were kind of in those first line management jobs all the way through to the kind of the executive roles. We now see that many more females are here, at those top levels, and that's fantastic. I think we've got more to do to create an inclusive sector at those top levels in particular. And I think that's something that, I feel very committed to. And you can use your position in this sector to influence, to bring about change. And there aren't too many jobs where you can genuinely and really truly say that you can influence and help to bring about change. And again, that makes it really, really worthwhile. It has been a great career path for me. I would not have spent my career doing anything else, even though I didn't plan to come into housing. I couldn't tell you all the things I've learned because I'm learning every day, but in some ways that's its biggest strength. You absolutely have to lead from the heart. You have to care. I would say if you don't care and if you don't have a wholly inclusive, diverse heart, this isn't the sector for you. Because we should never compromise on those two things. So I truly believe that housing management matters. We get to help people when they need it most, and we get to do it wholeheartedly. So for me, that is why a career in housing, is so rewarding. And I wouldn't have spent my working life doing anything else other than this.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Jackie. That's really, really interesting what you're saying about how you got into the job and like following a career that mattered, and really moving about, what a privilege it is to work with customers as well. I think what you're saying about how the complexity of the job will really resonate with a lot of our audience. Yes. And that kind of learning every day, that was something that a lot of our survey respondents said as well, that they actually really enjoy about the job too. Also interesting to pick up on that idea that 30 years ago, it was all men of a certain age that were in those kind of roles. I think it's great. And here we are, with 4 women on our panel today. So that's great. But now we're going to hear from Mavis Adamberry, Tenancy Sustainment Coordinator and DSL at Eastlight Community Homes. So Mavis is going to tell us about what her role entails and why that work is so important.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar to share more about my role and why housing management matters. Just like Jack, I fell into housing. My background is mostly working in retail, customer services, but then I moved to Essex 8 years ago. Then I needed a job, so I applied for the housing job and another job as well. Got them both, but then I chose the housing job simply because it was closer to home. But little did I know that this is going to be something that I really love and something that I'll be so passionate about and want to build a career in. So working, I started off with Eastlight Homes as a customer services advisor, helping people with chasing repairs, compliance, and the normal day-to-day stuff that they need, even food bank vouchers and stuff. But then I told myself that I've got more potential to do more. So I applied for the tenancy sustainment role when it came up, and luckily I got it. And my day-to-day role as a tenancy sustainment coordinator and a DSL is about empowering our residents to live independently, and also making sure that they are living in a safe environment free from any form of abuse or harm. I deal with safeguarding referrals all the time, and I triage the safeguarding aspects, and I support tenants going through domestic abuse to flee from it, or even the ones who've just fled, be it if they've got like fuel poverty. I help with like sourcing furniture. I do approach like a lot of charities and that myself, and like try and get stuff in place for them. And even if it's like even benefits as well, I help them to maximize their income. I assist them with like applying for things like DHP, um, discretionary housing payment, if they've got rent arrears, which means they could lose their property. So my role is essentially keeping the tenants in their home and ensuring that they are safe. And I absolutely love it because, like, no 2 days are the same. Every single day is different for me. And every single day, I do not know what I'm walking into, but I am excited because it is a challenge at the end of the day. And I love challenges because I am a person who gets bored quite easily. So I do love this job because it challenges me every single day and keeps me on my feet. And I absolutely love doing what I do. And it's just like sometimes the feeling you get when you have achieved certain like results that you didn't even know, be it like trying to get care in place for someone, which you know, because we see the tenants in their home, in their natural homes, and we know what they are going through. So sometimes, because other services are overstretched, it's hard for them to just come on what we have said and provide the support. But our tenants, they do rely on us, we, the frontline staff, to be their advocate and to be the ones who are there for them. So, and they know we don't let them down. And I do love that part as well, like advocating for the tenant, fighting for them until I know that like everything is in place. And I make sure they know I've got their best interest at heart, even if like cases with like self-neglect where they do not consent to the referrals for support, I will still fight. And in the end, I know they'll come to see that, like, what I was doing all along was to help them. Thank you. Hope I didn't go over too much.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Mavis. That's great insight into, you know, the work that you're doing every day. I'm always amazed by how wide your remit is. And I think that's definitely something we can pick up on later about how housing officers and staff in housing management, you know, do have an increasing remit and perhaps are picking up a lot of work that other service providers have previously done and no longer can do due to cuts. We've actually got a great comment piece from Mavis as well, talking about how what you're saying about getting into the job in the first place and how it kind of happened by chance, but then you fell in love with it, going live on Inside Housing Management later today. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to go to Abby in a minute, but just want to say, please do keep your questions coming in. If you have any questions for our speakers, it'd be really great to hear them. We'll be doing Q&A in about 10 minutes time. So yeah, thanks again, Mavis. So over to Abby Peel, who is a communities and placemaking manager at Home Group. And Abby's going to tell us about why she was attracted to the sector in the first place and what Housing Management Matters means to her.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks, Mavis and Jackie. There's so much passion. It's really nice, actually. It's really, even if it was just us five talking to each other, it's quite uplifting hearing other people's stories. So I'm going to buck the trend and talk about how I chose to go into housing. So I had a difficult personal experience when I was 16. I got made homeless because my dad had a breakdown, and I ended up moving from what was a really white middle class suburban area to a gigantic social housing estate. And it was quite a pivotal time when that happened. It was sort of at a point where I was making decisions about, you know, whether to go to uni. I was in sixth form at the time. I was in the first year of sixth form. And I coincidentally was already learning about social housing. So human geography was one of my favourite topics. And essentially we learned how housing was central to a lot of issues. So people's health, pension crisis, you know, population growth and things like that, everything, all roads led to housing. So I was already interested in it. And then when my circumstances changed overnight, I had a few things that happened. So one of the things was I went to a grammar school, and again, it was a lot of middle class kids and a lot of middle class teachers. And overnight, people started talking to me differently. I essentially experienced stigma from being a social housing resident. And I also was catapulted into extreme poverty. I didn't have a safety net. And I also, on the back of all that stress, became chronically ill. So in a really, really short space of time, I basically had my bubble burst. And there were things that I experienced which were essentially because of where I lived. So the estate that I lived on was at the top of a big hill. Obviously, Yorkshire is very hilly for those of you that have been. And I moved in February. And at the time, the buses wouldn't go there after dark because of antisocial behaviour. Now, again, for those of you that live in Northern England, you'll know that it gets dark at about 3:30. And so when I was trying to get home from sixth form, I basically had to walk a mile uphill to get to where I lived. And the area that I lived in didn't feel safe either. So I basically decided that I was going to go to uni to do housing. And when I spoke to our careers advisor, she said, "Is that even a thing?" So I had to convince her that it was a good idea. And 20 years later, can confirm it was a good thing. I've had amazing experiences. Similar to Jackie and Mavis, I started out in a contact centre for a local housing association. I then became a housing assistant, using my little pay increase to learn to drive. And then I became a housing officer, did that for about 10 years. And then I've sort of worked my way up through management positions. And housing stabilised my circumstances and provided me with a good income. It lifted me out of poverty. It's allowed me to live in different parts of the country. I went to university in Newcastle, which is where I live again now, but I've worked in Brighton and London doing housing as well, which is another thing that we don't really talk about, the fact that it's quite flexible and it does provide you those opportunities. And I've met some amazing people along the way who are still friends. Like Jackie said, you spend a lot of time with your colleagues. And there are some stories that really, really stick with me where I've managed to move people into properties, predominantly people that are disabled, to move into adequate properties, and it has been life-changing for them. And I think they're the stories that stick with me the most. And I'd written a little point about what my job entails, and I'd put it's about improving communities and community connectivity. And actually, that's what I set out to do. So when I was 16 and I was thinking, what do I want? It was to improve where I lived, and make it better. And also, I really, really could have done with some help and some of Mavis's magical referrals to improve my circumstances. So it's amazing that people like Mavis are out there, and I really could have done with those. And I think that now we are more equipped to do those things. We are better connected. And I think it's a great sector to work in. And that's my story.
That's great. Thanks so much, Abby. It just shocks me every time that careers advisor, is that even a thing about housing? And hopefully that's changed a bit already since then. But definitely part of the Housing Management Matters campaign is kind of about changing the dial on that and talking about, all the reasons why you said like those roles are really appealing to work in terms of like the flexibility, working in those great teams. The kind of the meaning that you get and the purpose from the job. really interesting to hear a different perspective as well, you know, from Jackie and Mavis, who didn't necessarily have that kind of all roads lead to housing perspective, and then that you did, Abby. So thanks, that was great. And so finally, we're going to hear from, before we go to Q&A section, we're going to hear from Alison Dean, Chief Executive at Great Places Housing Group, who is part of a really brilliant recruitment drive into housing at the moment, and she's going to talk a bit about that.
Thanks, Anna. Before I talk a bit about the 20% movement, I'll share a bit about my kind of journey into housing. So a bit like Abby, I was someone that wanted a career in housing from not quite as a young an age, but from quite a young age. So I did a social policy degree at university, didn't know about housing before that, but learnt lots about housing policy during that degree. So I kind of maxed out all my modules on housing and learnt as much as I could, and decided that I was going to pursue a career from that point. So during my time at uni, I got myself some work experience so I could kind of get a foot into the sector. Took jobs, part-time jobs in a hostel, a direct access hostel, which was a real experience for your first job, and kind of part-time at a housing association as well when I was up in Hull. And I then went on to do a graduate postgraduate course in housing policy and practice, which was the kind of the graduate routine at that point. And as part of that course, I did a kind of a placement and secured through that graduate housing management trainee role, which I was really thrilled to bits with, at an organisation that became part of Great Places. So I've spent all my career in one organisation. I was really lucky that at the time I joined Great Places, we were quite a small organisation, and we've grown over the years, and my career has grown with the organisation. I've been lucky enough to take lots of opportunities, so housing has given me a great career as well. I've worked, like other people on the call, worked through a number of different roles before taking on leadership roles, had a real grounding in housing management. I started my career in customer involvement, and as a result of that, feel really strongly about creating opportunities for people that live in our communities. That's never left me, and that's something that I've kind of taken into the work that I've been doing with others to establish the 20% movement. So the idea for the 20% movement came from a programme that I took part in, run by an organisation called Do Well. So I was working with other leaders in Greater Manchester, along with young people that worked in our organisations. And as part of the programme, we explored sort of wicked issues faced by the sector and by the customers that live in our homes. And we kind of developed real trusting bonds between us, and we got to know a lot about each other through that. And we expressed frustration that often as providers, we support customers or the children of our customers to apply for things like apprenticeship vacancies. And our teams will do an awful lot of work with them. And then often they're pipped at the post or overlooked by people that might, might have university degrees or might be a lot better prepared to kind of go through that recruitment process, where we've got some really great people of potential living in our communities. And we were thinking about how we could, do something to champion bringing those people into our organisations. We reflected as well through that we often as RPs do an awful lot of initiatives to get people into work that live in our communities, but that isn't necessarily with our organisations. So we wondered about how we might kind of put those sort of two reflections together. We thought that there are probably real business benefits to the sector in bringing people into our organisations that have got experience of living in our homes and communities and really understand the challenges that our tenants and their families face. And we, as you talked at the outset, Anna, we need to identify those people of real potential as well, because there's somewhat of a recruitment crisis in housing. So it felt like there was an untapped stream of potential there that we could link together. So we did a bit of research with the organisations in Greater Manchester, just to see how many of them employed social housing tenants as part of their workforce. And we found that often organisations measured their own tenants that worked for their organisations, but they didn't know generally what the background was of people that worked for them. And for the organisations that did measure whether they had tenants working for them, it was around 7 to 8% of the workforce. So we thought that was something that, through taking the approach of a movement, we could kind of champion and get organisations to think more about how we could work together on that. So the ask of the 20% movement is, first of all, the organisations measure where they've got social housing tenants or people that live in social housing working as part of their colleague base, but to also set a target for people that align themselves to the movement of growing that to 20% in 10 years, so by 2034. Like I said, we need to recruit more people into service roles, and it really makes sense to try and promote careers in housing management to people that already have some experience of what it's like to be on the receiving end of our service. So the movement's really active in Greater Manchester. It's gained a lot of traction, and we create a space where organisations can have conversations and work together on joint initiatives. So we've recently had an event where we talked about lots of really good practice that some partners are doing already. So one organisation in Greater Manchester are creating a talent pool of customers that their employment and skills team are working with to make sure that they've got appropriate skills to take up vacancies in our contact centre. Another organisation in Greater Manchester is making sure that all their first line, sort of entry roles within the organisation are open to customers. And again, their employment and skills team will work with those customers to get them in the right place to have a really good opportunity of securing those roles. We're looking at how we approach our graduate and apprenticeship vacancies so that we promote those really actively to our customers and give our customers a really good chance, and their children a really good chance of securing those vacancies. And we're looking at the potential for a joint portal where we can advertise all our vacancies in one place, so that there's a really clear kind of path for customers to know where to look if they want to pursue a career in housing. So there's a number of different things that we're doing, lots of things organisations are trying already, and we're really encouraging other people to get on board with what we're trying to achieve. So thanks for that.
Brilliant, Alison. Thank you so much for that. I think the 20% movement is a really exciting initiative. And yeah, we definitely want to support that with the Housing Management Matters campaign as well. And those different ideas about, a talent pool of customers and making sure we're pitching these jobs to grads in the right way. I think we would definitely pick up on that a bit later as well, because I think those are really interesting points. So thanks so much to all of our speakers for those great insights. We're going to move on to our Q&A session. Please do keep asking questions. They are anonymous, so you can ask your questions, and I'll start by asking some of my own. So my first question is for Jackie. So Jackie, you've previously spoken about how when you started out in the housing sector as a housing assistant at Stockport Council, it was by chance, and you only later kind of fell in love with it. I think some people would find it surprising, given that you've built such an incredible career and legacy in the sector, that you started out in it by chance. Based on your experience, what would you say to people who are considering roles in housing management now, kind of potential new recruits, about what kind of background or experience they need for the role?
Yeah, thanks. Definitely for me, a career in housing requires certain things. Now, your background is not one of them. You can come from any background to work in this sector, but you can't just be anybody. You've got to have certain things. You've got to, and just as I said before, that kind of, care in your heart and inclusion in your heart, you have to lead with those. This job will find you out if you don't genuinely believe in those things and you don't want to learn and grow with those things. So they're key things that you need to have. You need to have that compassion and be able to see things through other people's eyes. And certainly one thing that I learned very quickly is you can never bring your own judgment. Everybody's experience is unique, and how it impacts on them is unique. So you have to listen. You have to be able to listen. You have to seek to really understand people, so that you can really not take problems away from people, but you can help them take control of those things and manage them and move forward with their lives. So I think that's really, key skills that you need. You've clearly got to be good with solving problems, because, you know, many of our days are spent solving problems that are problems for people that are real. You've got to be good with people, and that's both customer and colleagues. And I always have this saying in my own organisation, when it comes to customer and colleagues, we have to go together. We have to go forward together. That has to happen. So you have to understand that, and you have to want to do that. We recruit for values, and that's really important. But the other thing that I would say is you have to be resilient, and you have to want to grow your resilience as well, because on day one, you won't have all the resilience that you need. Resilience is an amazing life skill. And that's what I would say you get from a career in housing. You get great life skills. So for me, they're the kind of things that you need to have. It's not your background, it's who you are that really matters, and who you want to be, and that you're prepared to grow. And that, you know, one of the things I always say to my colleagues is every cloud, you know, and that's pretty much how you have to see this role. You will have, not every day will be a great day, and not every day will go the way you want it, and not everything will turn out how you want it to be. And you certainly won't get thanked for everything you do. But that resilience and that knowing you're in it for the right reasons, doing the very best you can, just makes it the most amazing career.
That's great. Thanks, Jackie. And I know you said before about how there can be a misconception about, you know, people can only go into these careers if they have their own lived experience of social housing, but some of the best housing officers, you know, aren't necessarily from those backgrounds at all. I'm going to ask you a question to Abby now, because you, on the other hand, made, you know, quite an active choice to work in the housing sector, despite getting quite a lot of kickback about that. How do you think now the sector can attract the next generation of potential housing officers so that hopefully others make that choice too?
Yeah, so I think we need to be better at getting ourselves out there and talking about, obviously we all know how great it is, we've spoken about that, but I think as with a lot of things, social housing can be a bit of an echo chamber. And I recently mentored with an organisation called the Girls Network, and you do a speed dating event at the start, which is where you meet all the young women, and they ask you what you work in. And when I said I work in social housing, I work for a housing association, not one of them knew what it was. So, but when I told them about it, they were all really interested and said, yeah, I'd really like to work in something where, you know, you're improving people's lives, or you're helping people, it's having an impact on society, or it's got a sustainable angle. So I think the sector aligns with sort of upcoming generations' aspirations and their motivations. I think what we need to do is get out there and start doing things like we have been doing this in sort of our work close to our head office, is going to, you know, school and college open days, and talking about housing, and kind of, yeah, just getting word out there and about these positive stories and experiences that people have had.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good time to ask to another question to Alison, which is about, do you think it's fair to say that the sector is in like a recruitment crisis right now? And through your work, have you found some effective recruitment strategies that we can start to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's definitely become more challenging to recruit housing management roles than I remember it being, but within challenges are opportunities, aren't they? And I think what I've kind of talked about already demonstrates an opportunity that we can kind of really shape and grow. I think the things that Great Places are doing to try and address that. So I think it helps to have a really kind of clear organisational brand and a real clear brand for what you're trying to achieve within job roles. You know, we talked about kind of younger people and that, and not just younger people, lots of people have got a real need to do something that is of value and that aligns with their own values. We want to recruit those values-driven people, as we've talked about already. Just so being really clear on what the reward is from the roles and what you can achieve through them, how you can help people and how you can meet your own personal values through delivering roles is really important. I I think we've tried to be more straightforward in how we position roles as well. So this is what you'll be doing. This is, and positioning all that variety in the role, because you want to recruit the right people, don't you? So that variety will really appeal to some people that know 2 days are the same aspect to the roles, so we're really clear on all that. We're clear on what skills people will need and what we can train people to do. So I think Jackie's absolutely right. It's about getting the right people that have got the right aptitude. There's lots of stuff in the role that we can train. So it's not about having 100% of the skills met. It's about getting the people that will be able to deliver that role and putting a clear pathway in for them. We practice inclusive recruitment, so we're really clear on our adverts that if people don't feel they meet 100% of the criteria, to just contact us and have a conversation about that, because people will often underestimate what they do and how they meet criteria, so we can talk to people about how they shape their application to showcase what they can do and be clear, and then we'll understand what development areas that they've got, and that's enabled us to bring people into housing management roles from kind of sectors and roles that might sit to the side of them, where people have got transferable skills. That's been really helpful. We also do an awful lot here about growing new talent. So we've always had an active graduate and apprentice programme. As I said earlier, we are doing more and more to make sure we're positioning that to customers and make sure that customers and their families are in a position where they can be the ones that secure those vacancies, but that's really important to just kind of grow that talent base within the organisation. And I think finally what I'd say is having a real clear career path within your organisation, so people can see, a bit like Mavis talked about, how they can gain an entry role but then move through different careers and gain different skills, kind of lining up development opportunities alongside those, so people can see a career trajectory for themselves.
Great, thanks, Alison. While we've got you, someone from the audience has asked a question that was quite relevant to what you were just talking about as well. You were talking about obviously trying to be really aware of like diversity needs and within your recruitment efforts. Someone's asked, is the 20% movement already having an impact on the diversity within the organisations involved? Is it too early to tell, or? It's
quite early, but I think lots of organisations were already doing lots of things in this area. So what the 20% movement will provide is a space where we can learn from each other and do more collectively. But we are, from our own example on graduate and apprentice recruitment, we are increasingly able to secure people with lived experience of social housing, which is what we'd set out to do. That, so we're not just kind of seeing what I would call the typical recruits, which are people like me with a university degree. We're seeing different kinds of people coming through that will bring different skills and experience. And I think Jackie's right, it's about getting a blend of people in your organisation. But this is really important, giving people opportunity is really important. So I think there's a chance to grow that through working together in the 20% movement.
Great, thanks. And we've got some great comments coming in from people as well who are saying about their own experience and starting out in housing and how they've had great career development in the sector. Mavis, you've mentioned that brilliant comment. You've written that brilliant comment piece I mentioned earlier for Inside Housing Management about how you ended up in the sector almost by chance, and it was kind of between a housing role or a job in insurance. Now that you've been in the sector for a while, what would you say about career progression in housing?
I would say there is great career progression within housing, but it doesn't get advertised as much. And even when it's advertised, it doesn't get advertised in a way that it reaches people who are within different backgrounds to know how well they will do within housing. As I said earlier on, I started off in customer services, and I have progressed to now be a tenancy sustainment coordinator and a DSL for Eastlight Homes. And along that, Eastlight is sponsoring me to study my CAH level 3, which I'm doing it as an apprenticeship. And when I finish, I'll be looking to do the level 4 and level 5. Then there is absolutely, you just have to put your mind to it. And what people don't understand is, like, with the housing association, they do support you, whatever you want to do, they do support you. So it's just, you have to be yourself, and you have to be accountable for your own development as well at the end of the day, because no one will have to push you for it. It's what you want to do. If you set your mind to it, then you will get to like a better place and just keep to grow.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's another question which is sort of linked to that, which is probably a good one for Jackie to answer, which is, how do you support people with lived experience progressing beyond apprenticeships, entry-level roles, into like internal management schemes or mentoring?
Sure, yeah. So we do it a number of ways at Your Housing Group. We do have an internal leadership program that's been accredited. So we just had our first cohort complete that, actually. And I was amazed how a good number of them were already thinking about the next step up, how they wanted to use it to move their careers on. Because, of course, the best thing that learning and training gives you is confidence. And this is a confidence job. This is a confidence career. You need to have that level of confidence. The other thing that we do at Your Housing Group is we take part in a Greater Manchester Boost programme that Alison will know all about. And Boost is about people from diverse communities getting access to leaders and mentorship. But the real beauty, the real benefit of it is it's a two-way process. Those leaders are learning as much from those people from diverse backgrounds about how to open up this amazing sector to that amazing diverse talent that exists out there, to say, hey, you might fancy a career over here. Can you bring your talent this way, please? So many of us are involved in that, and that's fantastic. I also think at Your Housing Group, we have this thing called the YHG way, the Your Housing Group way. And it very clearly sets out, goes back to what Alison was saying about not making this look like some form of trickery, or you need a degree to understand what you're going to have to do. It just says, this is what we always want to see from you, but this is what we'd really like to see, that discretionary effort stuff, because it's in that discretionary effort that you'll build your career to move your career forward. And from that, you get on the leadership program. So you've told us, I want more, I want to do more. We listen, and then we have pathways for you to move your career on. And I think it's really important to get the balance of helping those in your organisation to move their careers within your organisation, but also in the wider sector. Because I think as a sector, we're really good at seeing the bigger picture of the sector, as well as it is encouraging new people to come in because they bring fresh ideas, you know, a fresh way of looking at things. So, yeah, that's some of the ways that we do it at Your Housing Group.
That's great. Thanks, Jackie. We've talked quite a lot about kind of recruitment and career progression and, you know, how to support people internally. In terms of what we were saying earlier about that kind of the misconceptions about the sector, and that huge misconception that staff don't care about residents or they only care about money. A question is, how can sector leaders and resident-facing staff start to shift this narrative? Alison, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, I think we've kind of said a lot of this already. So it is around kind of leading with values. You know, we need the right people in our organisations with the values that align with you know, our organisational values about caring for people, about being fair. You know, so in our role modelling those ways of working, and kind of leaders role modelling that, as well as kind of colleagues working directly with customers day to day, you know, we should be able to kind of shift that narrative on. I think similar to Your Housing, we translate those values into a framework for our colleagues at Great Places. We call it our service delivery framework, which is key principles of how we deliver service. So people delivering a service use their own professional judgment, but know what we're trying to achieve and know what good looks like. We reinforce that by sharing stories of when we've delivered great service for customers, and the impact that that's had, but also where we've got it wrong and what the lessons we're learning from that are. So we will share those routinely with colleagues in lots of different ways. We've got a colleague conference coming up where that'll be one of the things that we do. We share lots of great videos of the impact that we make. We share them with our board as well. So every board meeting starts with a couple of customer stories, and it's warts and all stuff. So it's that kind of sharing what is good practice and learning from that, and making sure that embeds across your organisations. I think as well, it's listening to customers, so just kind of straightforwardly, everyone across the organisation needs to listen to the feedback from customers and act on that. And it's about those kind of, in a kind of delivery of service to customers on a day-to-day sense. It's about doing those really good principles of service delivery, acting on things that you said you'd act on, keeping commitments, keeping good communication. Often when things go wrong, it's because communication's broken down, and it means saying yes to everything. It means being clear about what will happen next. And if you can't say yes to something, why? It's all those just general good service delivery. And if we do that routinely, I think we'll shift that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully we can start to make a difference with some of the content we're going to have on Inside Housing Management as well. I've got a really good question in from an audience member, which I think would be good if Abby could answer. It's with working from home becoming a lot more prevalent, the opportunity for new starters to spend their first few days and weeks and months sat with really experienced colleagues. And the person said they benefited a lot from that when they first joined, that there isn't there anymore. How can we think about welcoming and supporting and training new starters in this new work environment?
It's a great question, and I think it's important. I actually started at a home group in lockdown, so it's something that was really, really relevant to my experience. And it was tricky because I started in June 2020, so it was really, really in the thick of it when we didn't know what was going on. I think that having those experiences where you go out is really important, but I also think that that's important for all colleagues, not just new colleagues. One of the things that I lead on at home group is volunteering, and we have 2 volunteer days a year. And one of the things that I really encourage all staff to do is to utilise, because we get 1 day for an internal experience, is to go and volunteer where our customers live, because I think that misconception about staff don't care actually can be often busted by going out and speaking to customers and seeing actually that they live in nice neighbourhoods, or that they have good experiences, or that we can improve their neighbourhood in a day, for instance. And so one of the things I would encourage people to do is speak up if they've started somewhere about what they'd like to know more about. Ask to shadow people. I would say in housing it's very rare that people say no to things like that, but also I think as professionals, as we go through our careers, we've got to be inquisitive. And I think that, doing the volunteering is a really, really good way to ensure that that continues, not just at the start of a role, but throughout.
That's brilliant answer. Thanks, Abby. I think that the advice about going volunteering where your residents are is a really good one for people. So I think we've got time for one last question, which is a great question from an audience member, which will go around to each of the panelists, which is, which one piece of advice would you give to someone just starting a career in housing management? So Mavis, do you want to kick us off? We're tight on time, so if it could just be a couple of lines, that would be great.
Yeah, what I would say is always rely on your colleagues as well, because your colleagues are a great asset. If you're not sure, always ask, and always go with your gut feeling within housing. If your gut feeling tells you something is not right, just go with your gut feeling, speak to a manager, speak to someone else, and try and raise it and put it forward.
Brilliant, thank you. Alison?
I just can simply say embrace it all. It's a challenging career, but a really rewarding career. So embrace the challenges, look for the opportunities in them, and go for it.
Jackie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think I would say every day is a new day. Turn up every day as your best self, and you will have the most rewarding career ever.
Brilliant, thank you. And Abby, did you have one as well?
Yeah, I really liked Jackie's point earlier about keeping an open mind and not going in with any preconceptions, which is often very difficult. So I think that's really important. And I think my second one is about taking care of yourself. It can be quite a tiring sector to work in. I know that in my organisation, we have things like, counselling, we've got a me day, and I always encourage other people to take advantage of all of those offers that are within the sector. Most organisations are quite generous because it can take it out of you, as well as being quite a rewarding sector. So look after yourself, because you can't, what do they say? You can't fill up someone else's cup from an empty cup.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Abby. And I think, yeah, we've discussed before how housing officers are increasingly becoming the kind of last man standing, as other service providers can't provide as much. So thank you, everyone. That was a really great discussion. Before we all head off, can I just ask everyone who's still with us to answer one final poll question that you should see popping up on your screen today. It's about whether you'd be interested to potentially be a backer of the Housing Management Matters campaign. If you want to know more about it, if you click yes, we'll be able to see who's keen to get involved. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been a really great session. We've talked loads about, how we might start to, obviously, the beginning of a long journey, I think, but start to tackle some of the recruitment issues and some of the kind of perception issues that the sector is facing as well. Thank you so much to all our panelists. You've been great. And yeah, please do go over to the Inside Housing Management website and check out this campaign, check out our survey results and everything. So thanks very much.